Okay, for those of you that are visiting, we are, well, maybe I got a few people here. I just want to introduce you to, it's Seth Reagan and his wife Jen, and their kids, two boys, Tate and Finn, and their daughter, Margot. There's too many kids running around this weekend. And then got Jesse and Nikki, you all met before, and Posey and Junie. So, all right. Well, what we're doing in this class is we're studying from the Old Testament a little bit, kind of in preparation for looking at the book of Revelation, with the idea that you can't understand the book of Revelation if you don't have a fairly decent understanding of some of the history in the Old Testament. And so I've just been briefly going over some of the history of the Old Testament, and we got through the up into the Judges as of now, and we're going to be moving on from there this morning. And what is it? Anybody remember what's the main idea that I've been trying to get across about the people? Are they good followers?
No, but they always wanted something more.
They're always getting off track and having to get punished and get them back on track. And by looking at the Judges, we just looked at each one. The children of Israel would start, because they didn't, well, even when they left Egypt, after God had established the nation, they got in captivity for 430 years. They came out of that, and the first thing they wanted to do was go back, and they built a golden calf, and ended up not having enough faith to go into the land of promise, and so they ended up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And then once they got in, God told them to destroy all the nations. What'd they do? They left people still there, and those people badgered them for the whole time. And all this period of Judges was from different ones of these people rising up and getting after the children of Israel, and then them crying to God for help and him sending a judge. And so bottom line, the basic theme from Genesis all the way through is people haven't really been obedient to God. He had that plan from the beginning. Adam and Eve failed. Cain failed the next generation, and then it went from bad to worse. God ended up destroying the world with the flood. And then after the flood, the people wanted to build a Tower of Babel. And so God had to confuse the languages to get them to do what he wanted them to do, go out and fill up the earth. And then he just chose one nation, trying to keep at least one nation under control until the Messiah would come. And even that nation, we're finding, has not been faithful to God. And so at the end of the period of Judges, after 15 times at least, nations taken after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel crying to God and him delivering them from by one of the judges. Now we're at the end of the period of the Judges. And I'm just going to skip to the next. Jesse?
I was just gonna say, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was kind of cool because this theme of the people always pulling away from God, or the failings of God's people, essentially, which you're referring to being repeated over and over again. Another interesting way to think about it too is just the repeating cycle of God's compassion on the other side of it. Like he's always letting them come back to him. And so that's just a cool way of thinking about it, is God's like ceaseless love instead of like people's ceaseless failures.
Yeah, that's true. That's one thing that you shouldn't forget in a study of the Bible. And I've been emphasizing all the failure just because when you get to Revelation, that's what the book is about. God destroying Israel because of their final failure and rejecting Jesus and that. But that's what you're talking about, is the gospel side. With all the failures that they had, God was always there for them to run back to. And that can, that's magnified in the new covenant, because Jesus, that's what he came to do, is to live and die for all of our failures. And so that's the one thing that you can never forget. The book of Romans starts off talking about all the failures, how everybody wouldn't follow God. And Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it's the power of God unto salvation. And he says, for in it is revealed a righteousness from God. And he says, then right after that, he says, for the wrath of God is being revealed. The wrath of God was definitely being revealed at the time Paul wrote Romans. And that is the main reason for preaching the gospel, because you don't want to see the wrath of God. And so in order to understand the gospel, you have to understand the wrath of God, because that's how bad the wrath is. It's just the opposite of that is how good the grace is, and how wonderful it is that God is made a plan so that we could all not have to endure the wrath. Gene?
This is just a sidelight. All heard of General Douglas MacArthur, the World War II fame. It's been said that he said the greatest military man in history, as far as he is concerned, is
Joshua? Yeah. Well, he definitely was a great military man. And what was one of the last things he said before he died? Anybody remember?
I shall return.
Yeah, he said that. Joshua didn't say that. What did Joshua say? You guys serve whoever you want, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that's what made him the great leader that he was, is he trusted God and wanted to serve him. Okay, so what we're at now is at the end of the last judge, who was Samuel. When Samson, then Eli, then Samuel, they all dealt with the Philistines. Philistines were really badgering them. They were really a strong people at that time. And so now we're coming to the end of Samuel's life, and I'm just going to read this chapter here. So, and the reason for it is so we can understand. Let's go back. After the judges, then Israel asks for a king, and that's what we're going to talk about. How'd that happen? Why did they ask for a king? And we'll talk about it as we go through. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, it says, now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of the firstborn was Joel, and the name of the second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. So technically, Samuel wasn't the last judge, but let's read the next sentence. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, perverted justice. And so they were supposed to be judges, but they really didn't turn out to be much in the way of judges. And that's why we usually refer to Samuel as the last of the judges. So here's what happened, verse 4. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. Samuel was the judge, but he was getting old, so he appointed his sons to be judges. But they came to him and they said to him, look, you're old. Have you ever been told that? Yeah, sometimes young people like to tell people they're old. But anyway, it comes back to haunt you later. I think I said that to some people myself when I was young. So anyway, they said, look, you're old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. So we want to be like everybody else. Ever hear that before? Yeah, kids love to say that. Well, everybody's doing it. We want to be like them. Well, as we know, that's not always That's not always the healthiest way to live your life. But that's what they come and say to Samuel, look, you're old, your sons aren't following your ways, they're wicked. Give us a king. We want a king like everybody else. Well, then in the next verse 6 says, then, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. He wasn't happy about that. He knew it wasn't a very good idea. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say unto you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. So God says, look, it's not you, Samuel. It's me they're rejecting, but go ahead and do what they say. And he says, verse 8, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. This is not new, Samuel. They've been doing it ever since they left Egypt. And so don't feel bad. If anything, feel bad for me, because I'm the one that they're rejecting. Now, verse 9, therefore, heed their voice. In other words, listen to what they're saying. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. Now, somehow it sounds like I've read this before to you guys, but if I did, I apologize for that. But so Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and be his horsemen. Some will run before the chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s, and set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, bakers. As I'm reading this, I realize that I read this the last time. A few things have been going on since then. But anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of this chapter, but the bottom line is, I'll give you a king, people, but it's not going to be what you're happy with. He's going to end up taking your sons and daughters to be his servants. He's going to take your land. He's going to make you pay taxes and all this kind of stuff, and you're going to wish you never asked for one. Well, they did, and kind of to make a longer story short, this is where I really should have started this morning. We had Saul, David, and Solomon, 3 kings to start with. Saul was the first king, and how was he as a king? Start off okay. How long did that last? Not very long. And God got angry with him and says, I'm taking the kingship away from your family, and I'm going to give it to somebody else. And he ended up having David be the next king. And Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. What tribe was David? Judah. Excuse me. He was the tribe of Judah. And so from then on, the line of Judah was going to be the kingly line that ended up with Jesus as prophet, priest, and king. So anyway, he did David, and we talked about that. Saul, David was pretty good. He was called a man after God's own heart, but did he do everything right? No, not even him. He did some pretty bad stuff. And so then Solomon, when he became king, God says, what would you like? He wanted to give him something. And he says, I want wisdom to lead my people in your ways. And God says, well, because you asked for that, I'm going to give you wisdom and riches, because nobody would have asked for that. If God came to you and says, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? Most of us say, well, $1 million would be pretty cool, or whatever, But some of us would be more noble than that. But he didn't even ask for money at all. He just says, I just want wisdom to lead the people. Anyway, and he did that. He was really good to start with. But then what happened with Solomon?
His wives led him into idolatry, taking away from God.
Solomon ended up having a whole bunch of wives, and he was just getting them because they were pretty from wherever they were in the world, and he could afford to have them imported from wherever. But they ended up wanting to say, well, we want to worship our God. And so he let them do that, and then things went to pot. And so when it came to the end of Solomon's reign, his son, by the name of Rehoboam, up there, he became the king. But what I'm going to read next is how the kingdom divided. Israel was 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, but now it's going to split, and it's going to become 10 tribes of Israel and 2 tribes of Judah. Judah and Benjamin, but Judah is really looked at as just kind of one because Benjamin is so small. But anyway, we're not going to have a united nation of Israel anymore. Is the nation of Israel united right now? No. No, the Palestinians have part of it. Israel has part. So anyway, it's not starting off real good, is it? 3 kings in, and we're already going to divide. Well, here I'm going to read to you the story of how the kingdom divided. That's where we should have pretty much begun today. In 1 Kings chapter 11, that's where we're going to start reading. And verse 43, it says, Then Solomon rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father. And Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place. So now we have Rehoboam as the new king in place of Solomon. So Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it. Now, there's a parenthesis here. He was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt. I didn't tell you that part of the story, but while Solomon was alive, there was a bit of a rebellion with Jeroboam, and Jeroboam ended up having to go flee into Egypt to keep from getting killed by Solomon. But God had promised him, it had promised him that he was going to reign over Israel before very long. So anyway, Jeroboam heard that down in Egypt, and they sent and called for him. And then Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam. So this is all of Israel, representatives from all of Israel came saying, look, Rehoboam, verse 4, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the burden of service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you. Now, this is the third king in. Like God, it says, yeah, you can have a king, but here's what's going to happen. And it already happened. They were feeling really oppressed. And so they come to Rehoboam and says, look, we got a new king now. Can you ease it up a little bit? Can you make life a little easier for us? Now, what had Solomon done? He had become the richest king Israel ever had, and maybe one of the richest kings anybody ever had. And he did it in several ways, but one of which was by what? Taxes. You people bring stuff to me. So they're saying, we want it a little bit lighter. And if you do that, we'll serve you. Well, what did he say? So he said to them, you guys go away, depart for 3 days, and then come back to me. And so the people departed. They left. They made this demand of Rehoboam, or request, I guess you would say. And so they left for 3 days. And here's what King Rehoboam did. King Rehoboam consulted with the elders. What are elders?
Older men.
Older folks. Okay, just make that clear to you younger folks. Uh, he consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived. And he said to them, how do you advise me to answer these people? So he's asking the old folks, how should we answer them? They spoke to him and said, if you will be a servant to these people today and serve them and answer them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But what happened? Verse 8, young Rehoboam, he rejected the advice which the elders had given him and consulted young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. So his posse, he says he's going to consult them. I don't really like the advice I got from the old folks. So what do you guys say? And here's what they said. Well, he said, what advice do you give? And how should we answer this people who have spoken to me saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Well, then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him saying, here's how you do it. Thus, you should speak to the people who have spoken to you saying, your father made your yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus, you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips. I will chastise you with scourges. And so the young guys say to him, look, say to these people, my little finger will be bigger around than my father's waist was. That's how much more power I'm going to have over you people. You thought it was bad with my dad. He chastened you with whips. I'll use scorpions or scourges. That's what scourges were, the really nasty whips. And so they says, yeah, well, they want it easier. Here's how to rule these people. You just get tough and you'll get rich like crazy. And so Jeroboam, well, in verse 12, Jeroboam, one of these, the leader of the people that came and says, make our yoke easier. So Jeroboam and all the people came to him, and Rehoboam the third day, as the king had directed, saying, come back to me the third day. And then the king answered the people roughly and rejected the advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chasten you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which we had spoken by Ahijah, the prophet, the Shilonite, to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Now, that's what I referred to a little while ago. God had told Jeroboam that he had some things in mind for him. And so God was in Romans chapter 8, it says, to them that love God, he works all things together for good. He works things around. He doesn't necessarily cause every event to happen, but he works things around, and he used the rebellion of these people and all that to work it out so that Jeroboam would become a king. But it was because Rehoboam listened to the young guys with their advice, not having the experience of age, and they told him some bad advice, and but he liked it, and so he did it. Just like our politicians today, they're getting advice from places that probably aren't, people haven't seen what happens because of things like socialism. They can't see the end result because they haven't witnessed it with their own eyes, and so it sounds really good. Anyway, this is what he says, and the people rejected. Rehoboam rejected the request of the people to lighten the load and says, I'm going to make it heavier on you. And so I'm just going to skip ahead just a minute. I just want to make sure we get. Well, I guess I might as well read this whole thing. That'll help you see. This is what happened with when Ahijah was speaking to Jeroboam. It says, then Ahijah took hold of the new garment that was on him. He tore it into 12 pieces, one piece for all the 12 tribes of Israel. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and will give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David. Because of David, I made some promises to him. Because of him, I'm going to let them have one tribe, the tribe of Judah. And he also said, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Jerusalem was, as we know, the major city of all the people, children of Israel, and because of David and because of Jerusalem, I'm going to give Rehoboam one tribe and the city of Jerusalem. And he says, verse 33, here's why: because they have forsaken me. Here's why God's going to divide them up, going to split. They have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians. Who are the Sidonians? Sidon. Tyre and Sidon were two cities of Phoenicia. So it was this other nation, the god Ashtoreth of Phoenicia. And he says also Chemosh, the god of the Moabites. And the Moabites lived to the south and east of Israel. They were occupying Moabite land as the children of Israel, but they hadn't killed all the people. And so now they're wanting to follow after Chemosh, this god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of Ammon. The Ammonites also lived to the east a little bit. And they have not walked in my ways to do what's right in my eyes and keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David. David at least had not gotten into idolatry. But these people had, and so God says now this nation is going to divide because of it. So in verse 16 it says, now when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king saying, what share have we in David? Well, I mean, we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So Israel departed to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. And then, so now the cities of Judah will have Rehoboam as their king. That's the son of Solomon. And now this Jeroboam, another guy that's nobody, none of the other king's son, but the one that God chose to lead the 10 tribes, they're splitting off. So we don't have anything to do with David. We're going on our own. And so it says, then King Rehoboam sent to Adoram, who was in charge of the revenue, but all Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. And therefore King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. But as of the time of the writing of First Kings, Israel was in rebellion. The 10 tribes of Israel rebelled constantly from the time they began with Jeroboam, their leader. So it came to pass when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had come back, they sent for him and called him to the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none who followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And only the tribe of Judah stayed following the house of David. In other words, Rehoboam. And so everybody else was now going to be following after Jeroboam. And it says, when Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, that he might restore the kingdom to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. But the word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, speak to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, saying, thus says the Lord, you shall not go up nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Let every man return to his house, for this thing is from me. I have caused this to happen. So don't go fighting to try to get the other 10 tribes back. It's not going to work. And therefore they obeyed the word of the Lord and turned back according to the word of the Lord. And then Jeroboam built Shechem. Now Judah, the nation of Judah, with Rehoboam as king, they have Jerusalem, the big city. So now the nation of Israel is going to need a capital city. And so that's why Jeroboam is going to build Shechem, which is north, a little bit north of Jerusalem, in the mountains of Ephraim. And he dwelt there. And he went out from there and built Penuel. Jeroboam said to his heart, now the kingdom may return to the house of David. Now Jeroboam was hoping that everything could get reconciled, but that wasn't going to happen. I'm not sure if I want to read any more of this. There is one part that well, in verse 29, talking about Jeroboam, it says that he set up, no, I need to go to 28. Therefore, the king asked advice, made 2 calves of gold. What are calves of gold? Idols. So he's starting off just at the very beginning, just like God said would happen from the very beginning to the end. They weren't serving him. He made 2 calves of gold and said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt. So this calf worship, bull worship from Egypt, he's bringing to the nation of Israel. He's making 2 golden calves. How many did they make the first time?
1.
Just 1, and they got in big trouble for doing that. But Jeroboam decides, oh, we'll make 2 of them. Says, I don't want you to go to Jerusalem. You don't need to go to Jerusalem. I'm setting one of these golden calves up, as he says in verse 29. He set up one in Bethel and the other in Dan. Dan was at the very upper part of Israel in the north, and Bethel was right down pretty close to Jerusalem. So he's going to have 2 golden calves. He says, if you want to go worship, go there. You don't need to go to Jerusalem. He doesn't want them to go to Jerusalem because he doesn't have any control of Jerusalem. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. He made shrines in the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not of the sons of Levi. So he's just doing everything wrong. And I think that's as far as I want to read. But the very last sentence there, and he ordained a feast for the children of Israel and offered up sacrifices on the altar and burned incense. Starting off just worshiping idols. And so obviously the divided kingdom has started off not too good. Now, just so you can get an idea a little bit, I guess I'll put this. You can see that Jerusalem is right here and Bethel is right here. They're really close to each other. They're only about 10 miles apart, maybe. So one of the golden calves was just 10 miles away from Jerusalem, where they're supposed to be worshiping the true and only God. And these people were too. And then Dan is way up here above the Sea of Galilee. And so there's a calf there and a calf down here. So if you lived in the middle someplace, you just would pick, well, should I go up to Dan or should I go down to Bethel? Anyway, they had 2 places to worship. And this line here is kind of like the dividing line between this area is for Judah, and this area, including Moab and the Ammonites as well, and then all the way up to here, that was all the 10 tribes of Israel. Okay, so any questions about any of that or any comments?
Well, the nations in those days, they had more like a king mentality, and the king was what the god. Isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, I gotta try this. I put a link in here, and I gotta see if it works. Oh, maybe I have to get rid of the. All of a sudden, I'm not sure how to get rid of the. Okay, how do I get rid of the pointer? Okay, that doesn't. Let's see if this will. All right, now I got to figure out how to let you see what I'm seeing. Oops. Bear with me for 1 second. All right. Well, I haven't done this before. Actually, we only have 5 minutes left. I think I'm going to stop class and just rest and let you all visit for a while before we start the worship. We'll start talking about the kings of Israel and Judah next week. Anybody have any questions, comments? Seth?
And one thing, that the idea of setting up those places of worship in Dan and in Bethel, you can see how it might be much more convenient for somebody who lives in Dan to just worship right there, right?
Yeah.
And have to make the journey down to Jerusalem.
Right.
And I think today, a lot of us may be faced with similar decisions because there may be congregations or churches that would be more convenient for us. Maybe they have like a worship service on Saturday night, so that's more convenient because it allows us to sleep in Sunday morning, or any of a number of other reasons that it might be easier or better for us. But we need to remember and keep in mind that it's more important for us to follow God, to obey His commandments, and to do what He wants rather than what's convenient for us.
Yeah, very good point. And it's very easy. I've seen quite a few people change from the Lord's church going to other places because they had a better program for kids. But how much good it's going to do if they teach the kids the wrong stuff, even if they're having fun, if they're not learning the truth, that's not something you want. Anyway, anything else? If not, thank you guys for your attention, and I'll get things set up for our next worship.